Welcome to our 5th of 11 webinars in our 2024 Women in Leadership Executive Speaker Series, with this one specifically focused on women leaders in non-traditional fields. I'm Dr. Susan Madsen, Founding Director of the Utah Women in Leadership Project, and I'm also the Karen Haight Huntsman Endowed Professor of Leadership in the John M. Huntsman School of Business at Utah State University. And I am the host and will be the panel moderator today. This event furthers the mission of the Utah Women in Leadership Project, which is to strengthen the impact of Utah girls and women. And we serve Utah and its residents by first, producing relevant, trustworthy, and applicable research. Second, creating and gathering valuable resources. And finally, convening trainings and events like this that inform, inspire, and ignite growth and change for all Utahns. So I'd like to thank our sponsors, the Utah Education Network, UEN, John M. Huntsman School of Business, and USU Extension. So glad for all of you to join today, but especially our two panelists. So let me introduce you. I was working to cut down the bios, and I have a little bit so we don't take so much time, but it was hard. So they're a little longer than normal, but I want people to understand your background. So let's start with Trina Higgins. She is the United States Attorney for the District of Utah. And in fact, she is the first woman to serve as a presidentially appointed U.S. Attorney in Utah. Prior to her confirmation, Trina served at the U.S. Embassy in Malta as the Mediterranean Regional Legal Advisor for the Department of Justice. And she previously served as an assistant U.S. attorney for 20 years, where she prosecuted a wide variety of federal offenses, handled many trials, and held various leadership positions. So prior to joining the U.S. Attorney's Office, she worked in the Salt Lake County District Attorney's Office as a Deputy Director Attorney. And Trina has also been an adjunct professor at the University of Utah's College of Law. She is a fellow in the American College of Trial Lawyers, where she previously held the positions of Utah State Vice Chair and Diversity Coordinator. She is a past president of the Salt Lake County Bar Association and a member of Women Lawyers of Utah. She received her JD from the University of Utah S.J. Quinley College of Law and her Bachelor's of Arts from Weber State University. Trina, so good to have you join us today.
Thanks, Susan. Nice to meet you.
And Ally Isom is the Chief Strategy and Marketing Officer for Clyde Companies. She is a leader and a strategist who is passionate about building community and bringing people together to tackle tough issues. Prior to her role with Clyde Companies, Ally held posts in Utah's state government, including Deputy Director of the Department of Community and Culture, Government Relations Director for the Department of Workforce Services, and Deputy Chief of Staff, Communication Director, and Spokesperson for Governor Gary R. Herbert. Ally has worked at the global headquarters for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Public Affairs, Communication, and Branding, and before moving to the private sector as a Chief Strategy and Marketing Officer and Acting Executive Officer. So most recently, she was a Republican candidate for the United States Senate. In 2021, Utah Business named Ally one of the 30 women to watch. Highlights from her civic involvement include service as a Kaysville City Council member and Utah Clean Air Partnership Board. And I believe you're still on the Women's Leadership Institute Executive Board Chair and other things as well. And she had a Bachelor's of Arts in, and still has, a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science and Communications from BYU. A little bit longer, but I wanted people to know who you were. Welcome, Ally.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be with you. And it's nice to meet you, Trina. I can't wait to have this conversation.
So let's start by having both of you, and I'll start with Trina. Give us some background on your career path. You've been doing various things for a number of years. How did you get started? And how did you get to where you are now, Trina?
Thanks, Susan. And it is nice to meet you, Susan and Ally. I know this speaker series, Susan was saying, generally people who already know each other, are kind of already friends and working in the field. So as an outsider, I am very excited to be welcomed in, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to join you today. So my path here, so I'm a lifelong Utahn. I grew up in rural Utah, horseback. My dad was a cowboy, and I didn't know any lawyers. So the idea never occurred to me. But when I was up at Weber State University, I had a professor that said, you should go to law school. And I thought, well, I've got nothing else to do. I certainly don't want to start paying rent and get a real job. So I went to law school, and it became clear to me in law school that I wanted to work in the area of justice, that I wanted to work on rule of law, justice, and public safety, that those were the areas that really appeared to me, and I knew that that's what my career would be. So I jumped from there to the Salt Lake County DA's office, which is a great experience, but just a wild experience. It is working in that environment where you're handling just hundreds of cases at a time and everything's moving really fast. If anyone's ever sat through a law in motion hearing day in state court, you know it's a wild ride. So I had the opportunity. I actually was looking for the chance to work part-time. When I had my last baby, I decided I wanted to go part-time and spend a little time with the boys when they were home. I have 3 boys. And the DA said, no way. It's an old boys club. There was no thought at all. But the United States attorney, who had a daughter in law school, decided that he wanted to create that opportunity for women in the work field. So he called me up and said that I could come work as an assistant United States attorney part-time. So I switched over to the United States Attorney's office, where, as you said, I spent 20 years prosecuting here. I tried lots of really big cases. I worked in all areas here in criminal law. So I was the violent crime section chief for 10 years. I handled our environmental crime section. I worked in financial crime, a lot of big investment frauds here in Utah. So plenty of work in that area. And then
unfortunately, plenty of work in that area. How long, Trina, did you work part-time then? And were you able to transition? You know, it sounds like you probably transitioned right over.
So I worked part-time for 6 years. I worked part-time until my youngest was in 1st grade.
Okay.
So when he was basically in school full-time, I decided it was time for me to work full-time. And I had slowly increased my hours each year. So at that point, I just asked if I could come back on full-time. There were some people in the office who were being promoted ahead of me and said, you know, you got to get back because you want to be promoted. And I said, no, I want to take this time. This may be the only time in life they want to hang out with me when they're too young to know better.
So true.
So I kept those 6 years part-time, and it wasn't hard at all. As soon as I came on full-time, they put me in a supervisory position.
Okay.
So it wasn't a bad transition, really. And then during the pandemic, I decided to take a detail with the State Department.
Okay.
So I went to serve with the State Department. Through Department of Justice and the State Department, we have regional legal advisors all over the world, helping countries that need assistance with rule of law and public corruption type of issues. So I went to serve in the Mediterranean.
So did you move there?
Yes.
Oh, so
yes.
Okay.
I actually moved to Valletta, Malta. I served in the U.S. Embassy in Valletta, Malta, and also in Nicosia, Cyprus. So that's kind of the dream job. Working as a regional advisor, living in the Mediterranean was amazing. But then I had the opportunity to take this position, and I couldn't pass up the chance for Utah to finally have a woman serve as the United States Attorney. So right outside my door, I have a hallway of all the photos, giant frame photos of everyone who's ever served. So there are men, 170 years of men on my wall. So even though I had my dream job in the Mediterranean, I couldn't pass up this opportunity. So my name was sent to President Biden by Mike Lee and Mitt Romney. Both of our senators sent my name to the president. President nominated me, and I was confirmed by the United States Senate.
Thank you so much for that background. And I am sure that those years, we'll talk about this more, but those years being overseas probably taught you a lot. I mean, each piece teaches you things. And Ally, we've talked about this personally. Everything you have done has taught you. And I look forward to hearing, I'm just going to throw it right over to you for your background.
Well, I'm going to apologize for the background noise if there is any. As I mentioned, we're out on field visits today in Arizona, so I'm kind of catching you all between some things. But you know, when you say like, how did you get to where you are? Like, it's a complicated question. I mean, maybe God could answer, but instead of that, maybe I could try to give. I've just been open to opportunities and felt like I've been prepared at each different stage, moving from the public sector to a global nonprofit to the private sector. I could not have mapped my journey. But what I could say is, I think the advantage is that women have more opportunities than we've ever had for different combinations and permutations of possibilities than we've ever had. And I feel I felt very guided in the opportunities I've had. And I felt even prepared as I recognized when the next thing happened, because I knew I'd been obtaining a skill set to get me ready for that thing. So when it showed up, I knew it was the right thing for me. How did I get to Clyde Companies? After running a political campaign, I went on a personal silent retreat. I do this every year. I've been doing it for 8 years now. And I'm very intentional about how I spend my time. I count my blessings, I inventory my insights, and then I chart my course, and I leave with guiding principles. And those guiding principles helped me assess the 3 different professional opportunities that were materializing and allowed me to say, this is the right fit for me right now, based on what I know my soul and my heart and my mind and my body are ready for. This is the right place for me. So it is, you know, when you said non-traditional, I sort of giggle a little bit, because I do have a bag with me today that has a hard hat and a safety vest in it. And, you know, talk about imposter syndrome when a chick puts on a hard hat and she's not even sure where the front is, right? Like, I've had to adjust to some things in my career. But in the same venue, like, there's always something to gain and something to learn and something to contribute based on the experiences I've had. So I feel very fortunate to have had life experiences like Trina, where I was very intentional about staying home with my kids. And my job with the governor's office, after working in state government for a number of years, that was the first full-time job I'd had since college, because I'd been able to negotiate part-time arrangements where I would work full-time during the legislative session. Any family can handle survival mode for 6 weeks. And then part-time the rest of the year, because I wanted to be home when my children got home from school. So I felt very fortunate to have employers that were willing to adapt and modify. And I'll tell you, I honestly felt like in the 30 hours I worked at state government, I got as much done as anybody working 40.
Probably.
Because I worked hard. You know, I drilled down, I worked hard. I didn't waste, I did get feedback that maybe I could spend a little more time in social conversations with my colleagues, but, you know, I didn't have time. I wanted to get things done.
I love that. And I loved it, and you don't have to tell the whole story now, but I loved when you talked about working for the Republican Party and you were like 9 months pregnant, and some of those things were volunteer, but I think those,
Yes.
as I've looked at your career, those were so important in your career that ended up leading to public service and even running for the Senate. Any comments about that?
I think what I've done is, you know, it's easy to say in retrospect, but seized opportunities that were going to teach me something and help me network and help me learn from other people, so that I had as many possibilities open to me as possible. You know, I think that's really it, is the more you network, the more you put yourself out there, the more you serve and contribute and volunteer, the the better human you are, the better professional you are, but also the more people you know who can help you, and networks, business is all about relationships. And often, I've only had one job in my entire career that I actually applied for. They were people who solicited me, who came and recruited me because they knew me from another arena. So those networks have really been crucial to my career path.
And I love that. You just, wherever you're doing work, you do the best job you can and make the influence that you can in those. And I've had similar experiences as you. Trina, back to you. Now, I'll maybe not ask you both exactly the same question, but on this one I will as well. Just a quick question. I don't know, Trina, my question is this. What has motivated you through the years to be a leader? Now, I think leader is really broad, right? Using your voice, doing your work, all of that was being a leader. And then coming back to Utah is huge. But you said that you didn't even know what you were going to do until that professor told you, and then you knew. But what has helped you lean in to really be a leader through the years more and more into the position you have today? And Ally, I'm going to ask you that question too about leadership.
Well, I think if we're being honest, it's really a series of really good leaders and really bad leaders. Watching people that do it really well and picking up things that you want to do and seeing things that work really well, and then watching people who don't do it well and thinking, I could do a better job and the public would be better served if I was in that position. And so I think it's a combination of things throughout my career in different positions that led me to want to seek leadership positions within the office. This position is completely different. This isn't a position that you really seek. I had really no idea how all-encompassing this job was, but I did really want the opportunity to have a woman in this position. And at that point, I'd been in the office long enough that I naively thought I had what it took to take over this role. So this position is different because you don't really apply or seek this position. You kind of have to be in the right place at the right time and with the right support and the right backing. But throughout my career, there were points when I had some incredible women leaders. We had an acting U.S. attorney who was actually acting U.S. attorney twice in this office, Carly Christensen. It was just a phenomenal leader. And I saw the way that she did things and wanted to emulate her. Barb Berenson's another leader in our office that I watched them and really wanted to have the opportunity to continue the types of leadership skills and qualities that they had shown.
I love that. Thank you. And Ally, what has motivated you to maybe not always seek leadership? Sometimes we do, but sometimes we just say yes to things that come at us by individuals and sometimes a higher power. You and I both have talked about that. Thoughts?
Right. For me, the definition of leadership is somebody willing to step out and drive solutions, and they're not always at the top of the hierarchy. So my paradigm on leadership is one that I feel like you can also be a leader within an organization or in a role that where it allows you to solve problems. And for me, I wanted to be at the heart of solving thorny problems that require good strategy and bringing people together. I really think that's been the crux of my career is how do you engage all the stakeholders, the people who care about an issue? How do you bring them to a table and agree on the best path forward? And facilitating that conversation and crystallizing the communication, the key messages, and then inspiring people to move toward that shared vision excites me. Like it lights my brain on fire. There are certain things like email that kill my soul, but solving problems lights my brain on fire. And that's where I start thinking about there are lots of different paths you can pursue. How do you know which one is the right one? And how do you know which are the right partners? And that kind of thing makes me feel like I can make a difference. Those are the things I'm sort of drawn to.
I love that, Ally, because sometimes people like to avoid thorny problems, a lot of the population, but you know me, Ally, too, and I lean into thorny problems. In fact, it makes my brain, and Trina, I think you're in the mix with Ally and I on really finding joy in complex problems. So thank you so much for that. And I know both of you are pulled toward issues around girls and women. I mean, we love our sons and our grandsons, but there's this pull towards, with some women, towards really putting their head, heart, and hands into helping girls and women. So, Ally, what kind of has pulled you in that direction?
Well, I'm the oldest daughter, and we tend to speak up and speak out, I think, and like to bring everybody in. So part of it is I recognize the deficit. I've been in lots of professional settings, I think, where women are the minority. They're not always engaged or heard from. And yet I see the difference they can make. And I really credit my own father. If there's one gift he really gave me, it was he would say to me, you can do anything you want if you put your mind to it. But I also felt like that's because you can make a difference because of who you are and your unique experiences. And as a woman, I think that there's so much value at diverse voices at the table. I've seen it in my professional experiences when I worked for the state of Utah in the Department of Community and Culture, and we had the Office of Ethnic Affairs, which is now known as Multicultural Affairs, but we also prior to that, it was Black Affairs and Polynesian Affairs and Hispanic Affairs and Native American relations. And I just saw how important community is with all those blended voices, how much better the outcome is when we have this like shared destiny and this common identity. So I value women's voices, and I've seen women make a difference. There's a ton of data about women making a difference on the bottom line. And I've seen in organizations that they're stronger when women are valued. And we all love and know Valerie Hudson's work about communities where when you take care of women, there are better economic outcomes for those communities. And I feel super strongly about that we have to value the unique contribution women make as daughters, as mothers, as professionals, as volunteers. Having them at the table creates better outcomes.
It is so true. And we know that in politics. I know you are so pulled towards being in those community conversations and getting more women in good prepared women, right? In those
Absolutely.
roles. But the research is clear that representative democracy includes women. So if you just have
It does.
women,
It doesn't. Can I just point like a little asterisk here that I am concerned that because women generally are less tolerant of the tensions in political environments, that we just check out. We don't want to run for office. And more women are staying home from the polls and are not voting. And it is so crucial that we say to the women in the world, speak up and speak out, stand up for what matters most to you. We need them in those circles.
Thank you. Trina, any thoughts about your pull too? I know you have boys, you said. I have boys and one daughter. But this space is important for strengthening the impact of girls and women. Any thoughts?
Yeah. So my job really straddles two fields that I think are vitally important to society, that we have women in those, and probably legislature in our elected office is number one, but certainly right behind that is our executive branch and our judiciary. So in the one field that I straddle, which is the legal field, I feel like we are doing much better here in the state of Utah, particularly in our judiciary. I mean, right now is such a historic time in Utah. We have a majority of women on our Utah Supreme Court. The Court of Appeals presiding judge is a woman. The largest district court and juvenile courts are both led by women presiding judges. So
Did not realize that.
yeah, we are doing so much better. And in great thanks to our last two governors, Herbert, Cox, and even back to Huntsman. Some of these folks were appointed by Huntsman, that our governors have seen the value in putting women on the judiciary, and those women have risen to these levels of leadership. So one area in the legal field, particularly in the judiciary, I see that we're making great strides in Utah. There's plenty more to do. We still don't have enough women in our judiciary. We still don't have enough women leading law firms in Utah.
Yeah.
But we can see that they're making a difference, and having those women's voices in our judiciary, making those decisions, in leadership positions in our judiciary, making those decisions, that has to be one of the most important things for our society. The other area that I straddle is the executive branch. I work in law enforcement. I am the top federal law enforcement official in the state of Utah. And law enforcement is an area
That's
where we are
masculine.
way behind.
That's-
Another area where it's so important to have female voices in the executive branch. We need female voices making the decisions about how we enforce laws, about what appropriate penalties are, about how we run our law enforcement agencies. And that's an area where we really need more women involved. So I see the two different fields that I kind of straddle,
Yeah.
both being so important to a functioning society, that we have women's voices and that we have women leading those areas. So for me, it is vitally important. I go to the law school and I try to talk the students into coming over to working in justice, working in public safety, because it is so important that we bring more women into these fields that affect everyone's lives every day.
Oh, thank you so much. And I'll tell you, seeing other women, in key positions helps. And when you don't have, if you just don't see women, you're not going to see that you can be at the table. Now let's dig into, both of you are often in spaces where, through the years, but particularly Ally, you're in a very masculine field. And I love Clyde Companies. I've spoken there because there are a lot of men bringing in a woman and bringing in more women, but they're aware of this and they have a real desire to do that. Here's my question for you, Ally, is how do you help others in a real non-traditional area stay mindful of who's at the table, who's missing, all of that? How do you do that? We have a lot of other fields that are very masculine that are not making the progress, but I love that Clyde Companies is very aware and strategic. So what are some thoughts there?
Well, first of all, just for context, for those who might not know, Clyde Companies is the parent company of 7 subsidiaries. We're in 9 states. We have nearly 5,000 employees, and our companies include construction services and materials. We also do land development and management. We have an insurance company, and we're diverse, but yes, heavily dominated by men. Although I will say, Clyde Companies is doing better than the industry average. And it's not that we're satisfied with that, but we do think it's because there's an intentionality. Bringing me on as the first female executive was a meaningful effort, and giving me voice in the organization has been tremendously gratifying. I can tell you, even though there might have been a slight hesitation about donning the hard hat. I don't do that very often, to be honest, but it doesn't feel super comfortable to me. I didn't really envision it, right? But this company has treated me better, I would say, than some of the other more challenging roles I've had when it comes to my gender, that there is a respect, a deference, a kindness that I've really, really appreciated. Not that there aren't attitudinal barriers, because I am keenly aware that one of the early leadership meetings I showed up to, I was joking, like, gosh, if I'd known, I would have worn a blue shirt. Like all the men in the room were dressed in khaki pants and blue shirts, and there were 30 of them, and myself and two other women. And it felt, like, okay, there's opportunity here. But I will tell you, having worked in different organizations, that if there isn't a paradigm that values women at the table, you can only stay so long before that starts to drain too much energy out of you. So I would encourage women, like, life is too short to work for jerks. That's kind of a personal mantra. And I just think you just need to know when it's time to move on if it's not a supportive environment. How do I keep people at the table? I think part of it is I'm wired this way to speak for those who have no voice. I felt that responsibility in the governor's office. I certainly felt it working. I apologize for the background noise. I knew this would happen. Working for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints at times, I was very keenly aware that I was speaking for those who were not in the room, who had no voice. And you have to speak up for them and invite them. And when you put together committees, very intentionally say, is this representative of all of us? Or do we all have voice here when we're finding solutions? And that's where I think that's like the driving question for me. Do we all have voice in this solution? If not, then we find a way to engage the folks who need to.
Thank you so much. And Trina, I'm going to shift over to you, but I'm going to ask you a different question. I know, and then after this question, I want to pick up a few things that I might see, and you may be looking in either the chat or the Q&A to see if we want to work in a few of those questions. I have plenty though. But I want to shift over, and this might pick up a few things. You're in a non-traditional area often. You're especially the law enforcement side that you're talking about. But what are the biggest barriers more generally that you faced in your career? And were there differences in your early career versus, the types of barriers when you get later in your career for you?
So the frustrating thing in the beginning of my career was the level of sexual harassment and condescending. I know that is present in all fields, so I won't single out any particular field. But I felt like when I started my career, I had to deal with a lot of that. And it was extremely difficult. I mean, there were only a few of us women in the office, and you're all trying to move up to different positions, and everyone wants to get into the desired role or get put on a big case, but that means that you may have to put up with more than you should have. So I found that very frustrating. I also found that I didn't have the tools that I wish I had had back then to deal with it. I told a few people off, and I certainly removed myself from situations, but I didn't deal with it as aggressively as I hope women do now. I hope now that women will just shut that down immediately and don't have to deal with what me and my colleagues did. So in the beginning, it was more of that. And then,
Trina, real quick, I just want to tell you that according to research that we've collected fairly recently, I'm not sure how much progress we're making in that area. And one of the reasons is, and we haven't released this summary of research yet, but we asked, it was over 3,000 people in Utah, and then separated by gender, if they felt there was sexual harassment in Utah, and yes, absolutely is what's coming, but if they trusted that their organizations would do something if they reported it. And that was a pretty solid, somewhat disagree there. So just wanted to throw that in there, that there's a lot of, should we flip this statement, an opportunity for growth in that area. So back to you, Trina.
Yeah, and goes back to how important it is to have women in leadership
Mhm.
in all of these areas, so that there's a woman in the room that maybe someone will feel more comfortable reporting to a woman, or maybe someone will feel more comfortable, or maybe even just having a woman leader set the tone, that that's just not how we behave. I've been in positions where it was people in management behaving that way, and that just sends a message that everyone can behave that way. So I think, again, this is another reason why it's so important to have women at the table when we're setting the policies, important to have women in the room, and important to have women so that other women can feel comfortable talking to them. So that was unfortunate. I haven't dealt with that nearly as much as you move up, right? The higher you move up, the less that happens to you. But I have run into some condescending nonsense since coming into this position. I've had some federal law enforcement officers refer to me as darling, or say condescending things like, "Oh, you're going to be okay." Like, of
And
course I'm
sometimes
going to be
people
okay.
don't see that is, I really have heard from people. They're like, I didn't think that was, but there's this sexism in all of those, and calling women names like darling is demeaning. I mean, whether you think it is or not, it is.
Well, it certainly was in the way that this came across, but this sense that I am 100% sure my male counterparts did not experience, of convening the first meeting of law enforcement agencies. And so you are the only woman in the room in most of these meetings, although we just got a FBI special agent in charge who is a woman.
Oh.
Just moved here from DC. She is phenomenal. And so I've got a partner now. We can gang up. But before she got here, it was me and a lot of men. And 99% of the male law enforcement officers and leaders that I meet with are incredibly respectful. There's no difference in how they treat me and how they treated the last U.S. attorney. But it just takes one. It just takes one in the room to walk up and give you that sort of condescending, sexist, darling, and it's okay, and a little hand on the shoulder kind of thing that just, it just riles me. And it's hard to deal with. Now I'm in a position where I can just say, yeah, that's not appropriate.
No.
That is
You have to
absolutely
learn.
not appropriate. And I've had some other issues are really interesting. I do a lot of community outreach that we haven't, the U.S. Attorney's Office has not traditionally reached out to. There's a lot of underserved groups and populations in Utah. And so I'm really trying to build bridges between law enforcement and prosecution and those communities to find out, how can we better serve your community? How can we help your community feel safer? What can we do to make your citizens and community safer? How can I build the bridges? Because we don't want groups or organizations to be afraid of law enforcement. We want them to be able to utilize law enforcement. So that's something that I have been working on.
That's awesome.
But there are some communities, some particularly religious communities, but there are communities where the men are not used to having a woman. And so they won't shake your hand, or they're just not prepared to treat you in
Ally's
the
not
same way.
even. She's been in that, huh? They're not ready. And oftentimes, Trina, I would just say, I think there's more and more men that are interested in learning how to be male allies. I remember speaking at the Clyde Companies a while back, and some of the men ally came up and said, we want more, male allyship. How does that look? And so I think there are opportunities. Ally, I want to go over to you, but actually I'm going to give you both this question and shift over to opportunities. So you're in non-traditional fields, and you've kind of inferred, especially Trina, a few opportunities there. But, there's challenges. There's plenty of those. We could talk the rest of the time and longer about those. but there's also awesome opportunities. So, yeah, tell us a little bit more about opportunities for women in your field now. And just because I think a lot of women in college and beyond don't think of going to places like the Clyde Companies.
Certainly at Clyde Companies, we have a pretty proactive effort to signal to women that we want you here. The challenge we have is that women need to have the skill set, right, in the arsenal to step into the role. Some of them haven't had that experience to grab that skill set. So we want to make sure they're in the pipeline and they're getting experience. I will share with you, I made a recommendation to some of our top leaders that they each try to mentor a young woman, and I could just see them like squirm, like, oh, what would that? I can't just like reach out to her over everybody else like that. Well, people will think things, right? And so I said, well, okay, maybe 2 or 3. Maybe you need to like get a little cluster of them that you're mentoring, and that you're sending an intentional signal that we want you in leadership and we're here to help you in leadership. But you do, I think sometimes those cultural barriers or challenges, they just need a name. They have to be sort of identified and talked about. And it really feels like it's up to us as women. And this, I know this is going to feel unfair, but this is how we make progress, friends. This is how we do it. We speak in a way that doesn't feel combative, confrontational. We invite them to be part of our posse, to help look out for us, to solve problems for us, especially those who have daughters. They're so much more likely to be an advocate for us.
Yeah.
And we invite them to be part of the solution. And I think it's really important that we find those words that don't minimize or box in those who might have an attitudinal barrier. It's their blind spot. They may not know about it. So I've tried to change my paradigm from, look, brother, I'm here to fix you, to, hey, friend, how about I call something out that you might not have seen and invite you to help me solve it together? And what could we do about it? And let's own it together. When we do that, we can find our way forward. If we make it sound like a scarcity, us versus them discussion, like it's either or, not and, then they feel boxed in and restricted and limited. You don't want to make it sound like they're going to have to choose between men and women. It's more that, look, if you want the men in the organization to succeed, you also want the women in the conversation, because we'll help you be better and make better decisions. So I think that's,
the more,
go ahead.
and the more you practice using that language, that more, and it is, even though inclusive language can feel like something else, that is inclusive language, depending on where our male counterparts are at. And easing them in the door sometimes, it is frustrating sometimes to have to do that, right?
And I would argue there are more opportunities at places like Clyde Companies where the ratio's really off than there are at some other places that are getting to that 50-50 parity. You know, like if you want to advance as a woman, it's a great, go into an organization that offers you that opportunity and show them what you have.
I love that. Thank you so much. And Trina, any comments you want to add here, but I want to kind of get you one more question here. And that is, you started talking about some different things you're doing right now that probably the men before you haven't. It's important. And you mentioned a couple of other women who are in leadership roles as well. You've seen and you continue to see the benefits of having women in leadership alongside men, right? Any other thoughts on that, or thoughts you want to pop in related to Ally's comments?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me jump on. I want to jump on a word Ally mentioned, pipeline. That is something we are really focused on. So Women Lawyers of Utah is very focused on pipeline. The Utah Center for Legal Inclusion, which focuses on building diversity in the Utah legal field, very focused on pipeline. I'm focused on pipeline here. I can't hire an assistant United States attorney from the general public. the person has to have an incredible amount of experience. They have to have already graduated from law school and generally have quite a bit of experience. So building pipelines is really important to us, going all the way into starting in elementary school, encouraging women to get into these fields and people
do you
from
have
diverse backgrounds.
Do you have efforts in the K through 12 system?
The Utah Center for Legal Inclusion
they
goes
do.
into, starting all the way to elementary schools in areas where we don't traditionally see a lot of lawyers coming from. So trying to build the pipeline and trying to get people to understand from the very beginning, you can do this. Even if you don't know any lawyers, even if you don't know the path. I think there are just so many people out there thinking, well, I could never go to law school. It really just isn't that hard. It's the easiest doctorate degree you can get. It takes 3 years after you graduate from undergrad. It's an easy doctorate to get. And there's so many ways you can work in public service also, but also they're just great lawyer jobs and great lawyer jobs that can lead to the judiciary or lead to a position in my office. So we want to encourage people that wouldn't think about going to law school to go to law school and start building up that resume and know that you can absolutely do this. There's nothing stopping you. Of course, the more we get women in these positions, the more we have people from underserved communities in these positions, the more the young people look up and say, oh yeah, that is a path for me. But I also want to go one step further and encourage women. And I know this is your whole bolder way forward is about being bold, but also just go for it. I have people apply for these jobs all the time. Assistant United States Attorney is a pretty incredible job. Anyone who's ever had it will tell you it's the best job they ever had. So I get a lot of applicants. And one fascinating thing about my applicant pool is that I'll have men apply from all levels of experience. Men will send me resumes. They're just fresh out of law school. But women tend to not apply until they have developed such a huge resume. Women tend to hold back and wait until they feel like they're overly qualified before throwing their name in. And I really want to encourage more women, not just for this job, but for every job. Go for it. There are probably men applying for this job that have far less experience than you. It doesn't mean you're going to get the job, but it does. But I want to see more resumes from women. I want to see women applying for and going for these positions.
Thank you so much. I've got a couple of questions that have come to me. I don't know if they've come to you either, but I'm looking at our time and we're going quick. So just a quick response from each of you on a question that came directly into me. And that one really is about just maybe list one or two quick things, how women can support other women in the organizations. Ally, quick thought on that.
There are two things: mentorship and modeling. Coach them, find opportunities to encourage them, but also model for them and help them see what's possible and help them see what kind of conduct, behavior, language patterns, even, I'm sorry to say, dress. Susan, you and I have had these conversations about my curly hair versus my straightened hair, but like sometimes there are ways to make yourself more comfortable in an organization and break down barriers. And some of them are just behavioral, and there are things that within your control that you can do. And sometimes it's qualifications, and sometimes you just need a sister to say to you, hey, go get that graduate degree. What they just said to you about you not needing it, baloney. Go get that MBA.
And your comment real quick about hair. There is some research on, and Ally noticed a number of years ago, if her hair was natural and curly versus straight, that she got treated differently, right? It's so interesting.
Yes, absolutely. And I think I just think there's sort of this professional appearance that men get more comfortable with when you like fit in a box. But sometimes it's like, okay, I'm going to be very intentional about my personal brand. And then there's also this big part of me that's like, I don't care. I'm wearing my hair curly today with that crazy red sweater that I love. And I just don't care who cares today. So do what you think is right. Listen to that voice inside.
I love that. And while I have you, I have another question, and the time's just clicking by so quickly, but tell us, like, one book or one resource that you would recommend to all the women listening today.
I love Carol Dweck's work around a growth mindset. I think it's so crucial that you look at things as an opportunity for refinement and growth and improvement. So critical. And there's another one by Shirzad Shamin, and I'm like, oh, what is that book? It's about your internal saboteurs, and I cannot remember the name of it for the life of me right now. But
We'll send it out.
Shirzad Shamin is his name, and he speaks about the saboteurs inside of you that unwind your own progress.
I have not read that one. We'll send it out to all of you listening. We'll send these resources out. Trina, I gave 2 questions real quick on both of them.
Okay. So following up on what women can do for women, creating opportunities. I had some phenomenal opportunities to work part-time, to work flex schedules, to telework. And so that is something that we absolutely do in this office now that it's up to me to decide. We have a full range of opportunities. We have flexible schedules, we have part-time schedules, you can work truncated schedules, you can telework. For me, that is so important because we need to find ways to make it easier for women to join our fields. We need to make it easier for women to stay in our fields, and we need to make it easier for women to become the leaders of our fields. And we do that by giving them work-life balance. And so I encourage every woman in any position of leadership to create that kind of flexibility, because I assure you, much like Ally said, I was doing as much work as the men, absolutely. Because we get here, if we have the ability to work flexible or telework or different schedules, when we're here, we focus, we get the work done, we're super efficient, but then we also have the opportunity to spend time with our families. So I would encourage all women to create those opportunities for other women.
Oh, thank you. Book, resource?
What I like to do, I like to read biographies.
Oh.
I like to read biographies, particularly biographies about strong women, Ruth Bader Ginsburg or Sandra Day O'Connor. But reading biographies, you learn that people have had the same kinds of struggles and failures, or different kinds of struggles and failures. But I love to read biographies just to learn more about people. I think it makes them more human, and then we realize that maybe we can accomplish some of the things they did.
I love that. And I read a lot of workbooks, but the one biography I've read in the last few years is Eleanor Roosevelt, one of her. And I'll tell you that I'm a fan of Eleanor Roosevelt. So before we conclude, though, you both know about A Bolder Way Forward, which is a 7-year societal change movement to ensure that more Utah girls and women thrive in any setting. What do you think are, and that we got to be quick because I just have a minute left. What would you say? Just list 2 quick things that you think are the most important things to be done in Utah as we conclude. Trina?
Just continuing to encourage women to get involved, encouraging women that they are welcome in every field. Get involved, you can do it. And then for those of us who have a chance, to make it easier for them to do so.
Thank you so much. Ally?
I think the first thing is speak up where you are. You're not there by accident. Find opportunities to change where you are. It's because it's all these incremental changes that create that momentum that we're looking for. And the other thing is, I mentioned it earlier, but just show up and vote. Vote. You've got to show up and vote. Don't complain if you're not engaged. Don't complain if you don't exercise your right.
And I love that. I want to build really quick on that, though. because you, as you well know, more than I, Ally, because you're in this political space or have been for many years, that we need people to show up for caucuses too and become delegates. That there's such a drop off right there. And that really impacts so many things.
Absolutely is. Run for delegate and be part of the process.
No, thank you so much. Thanks to both of you so much for joining me today. I appreciate each of you and your insightful comments. And to those of you listening in, thank you so much for joining us today. I'd also like to thank our sponsors again, the Utah Education Network, the John M. Huntsman School of Business, and USU Extension for making this event possible. So thank you to everybody. Thanks so much. Have a good rest of your day.